Stop. Your financial field is still obeying an old instruction, and that instruction was never yours to begin with. This is a direct transmission from the Arcturian field observers. What you are experiencing right now, the money that arrives and disappears, the effort that never converts to stability, the quiet shame you carry about why it never seems to change, is not the result of poor decisions or lack of discipline. It is the result of a financial frequency program that was installed in your field long before you made a single conscious choice about money. The Arcturian field observers have already mapped this pattern. They have already seen where it entered your field, how it has been running, and exactly what it has been blocking. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your financial flow has been blocked, what hidden pattern has been draining your abundance, and what the Arcturian field observers already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. The scarcity you keep experiencing is not a reflection of your effort. It is a broadcast, a financial frequency inherited through genealogical lineage, absorbed from collective error residue, and sealed by a soul contract remainder. And it has been governing what arrives, what stays, and what exits from your material field regardless of how hard you work or how many strategies you try. You did not find this message by accident. Your financial field brought you here because the pattern has already begun to surface. The algorithm only delivered this. It did not create the timing. What you call financial failure is the first visible symptom of a hidden scarcity instruction that has been operating beneath your awareness since before your first memory of money. The Arcturian field observers have opened a 36-hour window to begin overwriting this broadcast entirely, removing the old code layer by layer while you are awake and while you sleep. If you have been experiencing ringing in the ears, unusual fatigue in the afternoon, vivid or unusually clear dreams, or unexpected temperature shifts in your hands, those are not coincidences. Those are confirmation signals. The rewriting has already begun in your field. Comment 777 if you feel an old scarcity pattern is already being exposed. Comment 888 if you are ready to reopen the flow of abundance. Comment I break the pattern if you are ready to end the inherited cycle. Like this transmission if you know your struggle with money is deeper than bad luck. And share this with someone who works hard but never seems to keep what they earn. Because the pattern does not resolve through effort alone. It resolves through recognition. Subscribe to Arcturian Gold Codex if you are ready to understand the pattern instead of continuing to blame yourself for something that was programmed into your field before you had a voice. This is not just information. This is a live financial field recognition, and it reached you at the exact moment the pattern became ready to be seen. You were guided here because the pattern is already active. What you felt when you heard those words, that quiet, almost involuntary recognition, is not emotional reaction. It is diagnostic confirmation. The financial field does not respond to words it does not already recognize as true. If something in you stilled, if something in you exhaled without permission, if something behind your eyes suddenly felt the weight of a question you have been carrying for years without knowing how to ask it, that response is the pattern acknowledging itself. It is not sentiment. It is not wishful thinking. It is the moment a hidden frequency distortion becomes briefly legible to the very field it has been governing. The Arcturian field observers do not speak to people who are simply curious. They speak to people whose material field is already signaling that the old instruction is under enough pressure to become visible. The recognition you feel is not the beginning of something new. It is the surface breaking on something that has been building beneath it for a very long time. So before this transmission moves any further, understand what is actually happening right now. You are not receiving inspiration. You are not being told to think more positively about money. You are not being invited into a program of affirmations, strategies, or frequency playlists. You are being shown something that has already been mapped, a hidden financial field distortion that has been operating beneath your daily material reality for longer than you have been aware of it, longer perhaps than you have been alive in this particular body. Inside this particular lineage, the Arcturian field observers do not theorize about this pattern. They have observed its formation, tracked its transmission across generations, and catalogued the specific ways it distorts the material field of the people who carry it. What you are receiving is not speculation. It is a report on something already real and already active in your life. And it has a structure. That is what the Arcturian field observers need you to understand first. This is not chaos. What keeps draining your field, reversing your progress, collapsing your stability, and opening the floor beneath you at the exact moment something finally seems to be working. It is not random. It has shape. It has origin. It has a frequency signature that can be read, diagnosed, and ultimately interrupted. But it cannot be interrupted through effort alone, because effort is operating at the surface level, and this pattern is not living at the surface. It is living in the layer beneath choice, beneath strategy, beneath willpower, in the stratum of the field where inherited instructions run without needing your permission or your awareness. Surface-level solutions cannot reach what is running at depth. This is why the same strategies that work for other people have not worked for you in the same way, not because you applied them incorrectly, because the field they were applied to was already operating under a different instruction set. Think carefully about your relationship with money over the last several years, not the single dramatic losses, though those matter too. Think about the texture of financial life over time, the way income comes in and seems to dissolve before anything stable can form. The way you handle one crisis and another, one appears before you have had time to recover. The way progress builds to a certain point and then something happens, an unexpected bill, a sudden breakdown, a relationship demand, a health expense, an obligation you did not see coming, and you are returned to the same place you were before the progress started. Not slightly set back, returned, as if something in the system is resetting you to a default, as if the ground beneath each period of progress has a trapdoor set at a specific depth. And every time you build high enough to feel the difference, the trapdoor opens and you fall through it again. That default is not your natural state, it is an installed state. And the Arcturian field observers identify it as a financial frequency floor, a baseline scarcity level that your field has been trained to return to regardless of what you build above it. Some people have a financial frequency floor set at survival. Some have it set at perpetual instability. Some have it set at almost, but not quite. They get close to consolidation, close to breathing room, close to genuine material stability. And then the floor asserts itself again, not because they failed, not because they made the wrong decision, but because the instruction embedded in the field does not recognize stable abundance as a permitted state. The floor is not a reflection of capacity, it is a reflection of permission, and the permission level was set long before you entered the picture. This is the first thing that must be understood clearly. You are not failing, your field is obeying an old command, and that command was not written by you. The Arcturian field observers trace these commands along two primary lines. The first is genealogical, patterns of lack, sacrifice, debt, financial shame, and material deprivation that were lived deeply enough in your ancestral line to become encoded in the energetic inheritance you received. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, encoded. The way a body can inherit a physical predisposition, a financial field can inherit a frequency predisposition, a default orientation towards scarcity, towards spending before stability, toward giving before receiving, toward guilt when wealth begins to gather. These are not attitudes picked up consciously. They are field-level defaults, transmitted through lineage the way water transmits pressure, invisibly, completely, and without the knowledge of either the source or the vessel receiving it. Think about what you know of the financial lives of your parents, your grandparents, the stories, the silences, the warnings, the patterns you watched without understanding them. The parent who never kept money, who gave it away before it could accumulate, who treated every moment of financial progress as a temporary accident waiting to be corrected. The family that always talked about money in a voice lowered with shame or tightened with fear. The inheritance of working hard and still not having enough, passed not just as circumstance, but as a kind of unspoken instruction about what people like us are allowed to have. That instruction did not disappear when you left that household. It came with you. It is running now, and if you look carefully at the financial texture of your adult life, you will find the same shape the field learned inside that lineage, the same ceiling, the same reset point, the same particular variety of close but not held, of earned but lost. The field does not forget what it was taught. It replicates it faithfully until the teaching is interrupted at the frequency level where it lives. The second line the Arcturian field observers identify is what they call a guilt-coded rejection of wealth. This one is more interior and more dangerous because it operates through self-concept. Some people do not merely inherit the frequency of lack, they absorb a belief, conscious or not, that wanting more is wrong, that needing security is selfish, that wealth is something other people have, people who are harder, luckier, less principled, more willing to compromise what matters. And so every time abundance begins to gather, something internal rejects it, not loudly, quietly, through choices that seem reasonable in the moment, but consistently redirect money away from accumulation, through generosity that exceeds available capacity, through the inability to charge what is actually owed, through the discomfort of receiving without immediately neutralizing it, through giving, through the vague, persistent feeling that accumulation is somehow dangerous, that being seen to have is unsafe, that keeping money means something must be wrong with you. This is guilt-coded abundance rejection, and it feels like a character virtue, right up until you look at what it has done to your material field across years, because the effect on the field is identical, whether the source is self-sacrifice, moral conviction, or unconscious fear. The abundance cannot stay. The vessel receives and immediately begins to empty itself, not through negligence, but through a deep internal instruction that treats holding as a violation. The person living this pattern often has a reputation for generosity, for availability, for always showing up when someone else needs financial relief, while quietly running dry themselves, and never fully understanding why their own ground never firms beneath them. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary frustration. It is the moment your system stops pretending this pattern is just bad luck. If this transmission put language around a financial struggle you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian Wealth Scan, the Gold Frequency Audit, was created for this exact stage. It is not another promise of abundance. It is a direct audit of the hidden pattern affecting your material field, so you can begin to see whether the drain is rooted in inherited scarcity, guilt around wealth, energetic rejection, or an older financial instruction still shaping your results. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. The Arcturian field observers have identified 7 distinct patterns through which this old financial instruction makes itself visible. Not all 7 will apply to every person hearing this transmission, but the ones that apply will be unmistakable. Pay attention to the ones that produce recognition rather than mere interest. Recognition is the field responding to accurate diagnosis. Interest is the mind finding something interesting. Recognition is the body going still because it has heard something it already knows. Those are different responses. The first pattern is what the Arcturian field observers call retention collapse. This is the experience of money that arrives but cannot settle. Income comes in, perhaps enough, perhaps more than enough, and within a short period it is gone, not through single large losses alone, though sometimes that too, through an accumulation of drains that seem individually justified but collectively leave nothing behind. The repair that had to happen, the obligation that could not be delayed, the opportunity that required investment, the person who needed help. Individually, each of these makes sense, but the pattern they form together is not logic. It is a field instruction that will not permit a reservoir to form. Whatever enters must exit. The vessel cannot hold. And no matter how often you refill it, the same invisible leak ensures the floor reasserts itself before stability can take shape. The person experiencing retention collapse often becomes very skilled at managing scarcity, reorganizing, prioritizing, stretching what little remains, without ever addressing the mechanism that keeps ensuring there is little remaining. The management skills improve, the underlying drain continues, unchanged. The second pattern is effort to result disconnection. This is perhaps the most psychologically damaging of all the visible signs, because it directly attacks self-concept. You work harder than people around you who seem to accumulate with less difficulty. You apply yourself, you sacrifice, you persist through conditions that would justify stopping, and the result does not match the effort. Not moderately, not in a way that suggests you simply need to work smarter, in a way that feels structurally wrong, as though the work you do is entering a field that converts it into something other than stability. Something is filtering the output between your effort and your material result. Something is intercepting the natural conversion of energy into abundance and redirecting it before it can settle as security. You pour in, nothing accumulates. And because the cultural story insists that effort is what determines outcome, the absence of accumulation gets interpreted as evidence of personal inadequacy rather than what it actually is, a field-level distortion intercepting the signal between input and result. The Arcturian field observers identify this as a frequency mismatch between your active effort and your field's inherited receiving capacity. You are generating energy at one frequency, and your field is still only permitted to receive at a lower one. The difference disappears into the gap. This is not failure. This is a calibration problem, and calibration problems are fixable once they are named. The effort was real. The work was real. What was distorted was the field's capacity to translate that work into its natural material equivalent. Naming this is not an excuse. It is the first accurate diagnosis the field has received, possibly in a very long time. The third pattern is threshold interference. This one is particular and painful. It does not show up in the worst moments. It shows up at the best ones. You reach a point where things are finally beginning to consolidate. A deal comes through. A period of income stability emerges. A financial breathing room opens that has not been available in a long time. And something happens. Something arrives. Something breaks, demands, or reverses. And you do not lose everything. That would almost be easier to process. You lose just enough to be returned to uncertainty. Just enough to ensure that the consolidation cannot hold. The threshold was reached, and the pattern pushed back against it. This is the financial field's most recognizable protection mechanism, keeping the system from exceeding the inherited permission level. The moment abundance begins to approach what the old instruction does not permit, interference appears at the threshold, and the viewer who has experienced this will recognize it not as bad luck alone, but as a repeating structure. The same threshold, reached and interrupted again. There is a specific quality of despair that belongs only to this pattern. Not the despair of someone who has never had anything, but the despair of someone who keeps getting close, who can see what stability would feel like from the distance of almost having it, and who is returned from that threshold with enough consistency that the hope itself begins to feel like a liability. The fourth pattern is what the Arcturian field observers identify as material environment drain. This is the experience of everything around you demanding money at once. Objects break, systems fail, situations deteriorate at the precise moment you have something to protect. The car, the household, the health, the relationship that requires financial attention. It begins to feel as though the material environment itself is in alignment with keeping you depleted, as if the outer world is reading the same instruction the inner field is following. And in a specific sense, it is. The outer material reality does not generate these demands independently of the field. It responds to the field's frequency. A field that carries a scarcity instruction will organize a material environment that continuously confirms scarcity. not through supernatural intervention, through frequency correspondence. The field calls what matches it. The environment becomes a mirror of the instruction, and the mirror shows depletions with extraordinary consistency, regardless of how carefully you try to maintain what you have built. The fifth pattern is inherited sacrifice as identity. This one does not feel like a financial problem at first. It feels like a value, the belief, absorbed from family, from culture, from the accumulated evidence of watching people you respected struggle, that financial hardship is a form of integrity, that the people who truly work hard do not live in ease, that abundance is somehow suspect, that sacrifice is noble and comfort is indulgent. This belief does not announce itself as a financial blocker. It presents itself as a moral orientation, but what it does in practice is ensure that the moment your field begins to orient towards stability, a part of you distrusts it. A part of you waits for the punishment that must accompany having too much. A part of you believes, without saying it directly, that you are more yourself when you are struggling than when you are stable. Ease feels like evidence of something wrong. Hardship feels like evidence of something right. And so the field perpetuates hardship, not because it must, but because hardship has been coded as the correct condition, the condition that signals you are living properly, working genuinely, belonging to the lineage that shaped you. The Arcturian field observers describe this as loyalty to the ancestral line expressed through material replication. You do not merely inherit their patterns, you protect them, because abandoning the struggle feels like abandoning the people who taught you what life was supposed to cost. To become stable where they were unstable feels, somewhere beneath conscious awareness, like a betrayal, like rising above rather than remaining with. And so the field keeps the struggle alive, not through laziness or failure, but through a loyalty so deep it does not even know it is loyalty. It reads as personal reality. It presents as simply the way things are. The sixth pattern is guilt around incoming abundance. This one operates in real time. When money arrives, a windfall, an unexpected payment, a period of increased income, instead of receiving it cleanly, the system floods with discomfort, a low-level unease, the impulse to immediately give it away, spend it, or find a reason why it cannot stay, not through irresponsibility, through an energetic rejection that feels like conscience, but functions as sabotage. The guilt is not random. It is a signal from the field that abundance is registered as a threat to identity, to belonging, to the unspoken contracts made within a family or community, where having more meant having too much, where visibility through wealth meant exposure to envy, to expectation, to the implicit demand that you share what you have until you no longer have it. If you have ever felt strangely anxious when money increased, if you have ever given away more than you could afford in the immediate aftermath of financial gain, if you have ever found yourself spending in ways that felt compulsive rather than chosen following an income increase, you are not undisciplined. You are guilt-coded. The pattern is protecting the old field level by ensuring the new input cannot stay. The abundance arrives and the system immediately begins to neutralize it because the field does not yet have permission to be the kind of person who holds it. The seventh pattern is the deepest and most important to recognize. The Arcturian field observers called it the invisible contract of incompatibility with stability. This is not a behavior. It is a fundamental field-level instruction that treats material security as something that belongs to someone else, to a different kind of person from a different kind of origin, with a different relationship to deserving. It shows up as the quiet, persistent sense that no matter what you do, full stability is not something your life is actually built to contain, not because you have been told this in words, because it has been demonstrated through a lifetime of partial arrivals and incomplete consolidations, and the pattern has been interpreted, incorrectly, but understandably, as evidence about who you are, rather than as a signal about what is distorting your field. The contract was never signed consciously. It was inherited as a condition of belonging. It was absorbed through every financial story you watched unfold around you before you had the capacity to evaluate whether that story was true. And it has been governing your material reality with the authority of something you agreed to, because at the field level, you never disagreed. This is the interpretation the Arcturian field observers most urgently want to correct. The pattern you have been living is not a verdict. It is a distortion, and distortions can be diagnosed, mapped, and corrected with precision, but only if the viewer stops interpreting evidence of the pattern as evidence of personal unworthiness. Because every time the pattern produces another cycle of loss or reset or interrupted consolidation, it generates fresh data that the mind converts into a story about who you are, and that story deepens the instruction. It makes the pattern harder to see as external. It makes it feel more like identity, more like destiny, more like the honest assessment of a life honestly lived. None of that is accurate. All of it is the distortion completing its own reinforcement cycle. Here is the ultimate truth that this entire transmission has been building toward. What you have called financial failure across the months and years of your adult life is not failure in the ordinary sense. It is the predictable output of a field still running a program that was never calibrated to your potential, your effort, or your actual capacity to hold abundance. The program was installed before you made your first financial decision. It was sealed by patterns absorbed in childhood, reinforced by the accumulated evidence those patterns created, and protected by a guilt structure that made abundance feel more dangerous than lack. You did not write this program. You have simply been living inside it, mistaking its outputs for facts about who you are. The exhaustion you feel when you review your financial history is not the exhaustion of someone who has failed repeatedly. It is the exhaustion of someone who has been working against an invisible resistance for years without knowing the resistance had a name, a structure, and a point of origin entirely separate from their own will. The Arcturian field observers do not diagnose this pattern to assign blame, not to your ancestors, not to you. They diagnose it because a pattern that has been named can be interrupted, a distortion that has been mapped can be corrected, and a financial field that has been running an old instruction can, with precise intervention, begin to run a new one. The naming is not symbolic. It is the first act of actual correction, because the field cannot be reprogrammed at the level it needs to be reprogrammed unless what is running inside it has first been made visible. You cannot overwrite what you cannot locate, and now you have located it. What you have been calling bad luck is a readable pattern. What you have been calling personal limitation is an inherited frequency mismatch. What you have been calling the way your life just is a broadcast. And broadcasts can be changed. If you are ready to stop explaining the same drain with different words each year, speak this clearly wherever you are right now. I no longer confuse the pattern with my identity. What drains my abundance is now being exposed. I am ready to hold what once could not remain. Those words are not affirmation, they are field-level declaration. And your financial field has been listening to everything you say about it for longer than you realize. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this pattern has already touched your financial life. It could be money that never stays, sudden drains, repeated setbacks, guilt when things begin to improve, or the feeling that stability always slips away. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who works hard but still feels trapped in an invisible cycle of lack. And if you are ready to understand the pattern instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Gold Codex. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a pattern already in motion. And this is only the beginning.